Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, welcome back with me, Miss Ira, in the presentation of language assessment, principle and classroom practices. Okay, we are going to talk about chapter 7. Chapter 7, entitled Beyond Test, Alternative in Assessment. Okay, let's get started. Okay, this is a brief history. Early in the decade of 1990s, in a culture of rebellion, blah, 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 a novel concept emerged that began to be labeled alternative assessment. And then based on Brown and Hudson also noted that to speak of alternative assessment is counterproductive because the term implies something new and different that may be exempt from the requirements of responsible test construction. So they proposed to refer alternatives in assessment instead. Their terms is a perfect fit within a model that considers tests as a subset of assessment. Okay, these are the characteristics of alternatives in assessment. The first is they require students to perform, create, produce, or do something. The second is they use real-world context or stimulations. The third is they are non-intrusive in that they extend the day-to-day classroom activities. And then the fourth is they allow students to be assessed on what they normally do in class. And then they use tasks that represent meaningful instructional activities. They focus on process as well as products. And then they tap into higher level thinking and problem solving skills. That's all the characteristic of alternative in assessment. And the first subchapter is dilemma in standardized and alternative in assessment. All right. Formal standardized tests are almost by definition highly practical, reliable instruments. They are designed to minimize time and money on the part of test designer and test taker and to be painstakingly accurate in their scoring. And then alternatives such as portfolios of conferencing with student on draft of written work or observation of learners overall over time all require considerable time and effort on the part of the teacher and the student. But the alternative technique also offer markedly greater washback are superior formative natures and because of their authenticity usually carry greater face validity. Okay, this is the table, yeah? From high particle and reliability and also low washback authenticity and high. Okay, the second is performance-based assessment. Performance-based assessment implies productive, observable skills such as speaking and writing of contents-valid tasks. Such performance usually, but not always, brings with it an air of authenticity, real-world tasks that students have had time to develop. It often implies an integration of language skills, perhaps all 4 skills in the case of project work. The characteristic of performance assessment, the first is students make a constructed response. They engage in higher order thinking with open-ended tasks. And the third is tasks are meaningful, engaging, and then authentic. The fourth is tasks call for the integration of language skill, both process and product are assessed. Then type of a student's mastery in emphasize over breadth. Then these are the procedures for performance-based assessment. The first is state the overall goal of the performance, specify the objective, prepare student for performance in stepwise progression, use a reliable evaluation form, checklist, or rating sheet, and then treat performances as opportunities for giving feedback and provide the feedback systematically and if possible, utilize self and peer assessment judiciously. The third is portfolios. A portfolio is a purposeful collection of student work that demonstrates student efforts, progress, and achievement in given areas, based on Janice and Absher 1996. Portfolios include materials such as essays, and then composition in draft and final forms, reports, project outlines, audio and video recordings of presentation, demonstration, journals, diaries, and then other personal reflection, tests, test scores, written home exercise, self and peer assessment, comments, evaluation, and checklists. This is the attributes of portfolios. The first is collecting, the second is reflecting, the third is assessing, the fourth is documenting, linking, and evaluating. Collecting is an expression of student lives and identify. Reflecting is thinking about the experience and activities, and then assessing, evaluating quality and development over time, documenting, demonstrating student achievement, and then linking, connecting students and teacher, parent, community, and peer. And then evaluating is generating responsible outcomes. This is the step and guidelines. And then the fourth is journals. A journal is a log of one's thought, feeling, reaction, assessment, ideas, or progress toward goals, usually written with little attention to structure, form, or correctness. And then journals obviously serve important pedagogical purposes, practice in the mechanic of writing, using writing as a thinking process, individualization, and communication with the teacher. This is step 4 journals, sensitively introduce students to the concept of journal writing, state the objective, give guidelines of what kind of topic include, carefully specify the criteria for assessing for creating journals, provide optimal feedback in your response, design appropriate timeframes and schedule of review, and then provide formative watchback giving final comments. The fifth is conferences and interviews. Conferences are not limited to draft of written work. It must assume that the teacher plays the role of facilitator and guide, not of an administrator of assessment. Okay, a number of general questions that may be useful to pose in converse are, for example, what did you like about this work? What do you think you did well? How does it show improvement? And blah, blah, blah. Okay, and then guidelines for conferences and interviews. The first is over an initial atmosphere of warmth and anxiety lowering, or we call it warm-up. And then begin with relatively simple question, continue with level check and probe question, but adapt to the interviews as needed. The fourth is frame question simply and directly, and focus on only one factor for each question. Do not combine several objectives in the same question. And then be prepared to repeat or reframe questions that are not understood. And then wind down with friendly and reassuring dosing comments. The sixth is observation. Observation is a systematic planned procedure for real-time, almost type recording of student verbal and nonverbal behavior. This is the potential observation. The first is sentence level oral production skill, and then pronunciation, tough target sounds, intonation, and etc. Grammatical features, discourse level skills, and then interaction with classmates, and then frequently of students' initiated responses. And then steps for observation. These are the steps for observation. Determine the specific objective. Decide how many students will be observed. set up the logistic for making unnoticed observation, design a system for recording observed performances. Do not overestimate the number of different elements you can observe at one time. Plan how many observations you will make, and then determine specifically how you will use the result. Alternative in observation. The observer identifies an activity or episode and check boxes along a grid. This grid refers to variables such as whole class, group, individual participation, linguistic competence, and then each variable has subcategories for better analysis. And then rating scales have also been suggested for recording observation. One type of rating scale asks teacher to indicate the frequency of occurrence of target performance on separate frequency scale. Always, the score of always is 5 and never is 1. And then another is a holistic assessment scale that requires an overall assessment within a number of categories. For example, vocabulary usage, grammatical correctness, and fluency. The seventh is self and peer assessment. Self-assessment derives its theoretical justification from a number of well-established principles of second language acquisition. The principle of autonomy is vital. It consists of ability to set one's own goals both within and beyond the structure of classroom curriculum. And then peer assessment appeals to similar principles. The most obvious, which is cooperative learning. Many people go through a whole regimen of education from kindergarten up through a graduate degree and never come to appreciate the value of collaboration in learning. And then peer assessment is simply one arm of a plethora of tasks and procedure, the domain of learner-centered and collaboration education. Types of self and peer assessment: assessment of specific performance, indirect assessment, and general competence, and a metacognitive assessment, socio-affective, and then student-generated task. And then guideline for self and peer assessment. First is tell student the purpose of the assessment. The second is define the task clearly, and then encourage impartial evaluation of performance or ability, and the last is ensure beneficial watchback through follow-up tasks. And then these are self and peer assessment tasks. For listening tasks, listen to the TV or radio broadcast and checking comprehension with partner. Listening to the academic lecturer, and checking yourself on a quiz of the context. And then speaking task using peer checklists and questionnaires, and then rating someone's oral presentation or holistically, and then reading task, reading passage, and just like reading passage, and then talking vocabulary quizzes. And then for writing task is revising written work on your own with a peer, or we call it peer editing, yeah? And then the second is proofreading. All right, that's all that we can talk about chapter 10. I hope that you also read the book from H. Douglas Brown, Language Assessment, Principle and Classroom Practices. Okay, I'm Miss Ira. See you on the next video. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bye-bye.